Welcome all to the Sephirah Center of Shamanism. My name is Luke, experienced practitioner and mentor of the shamanic and occult sciences. It's my honor to welcome you to my channel, whereby we break down the ancient technologies of both shamanism and the occult, bringing them into balance with the modern psychology and deep psyche. Before I go into this topic, definitely check out my membership programs in the first and second links of the description of this video. The first link is my Patreon that will give you access to all of my exclusive content, lots of initiatory systems, attunements, various different practices and advanced path workings, all of which were available on my website at a much higher price. You can gain access to all of these at just a small monthly subscription of £20 per month. New content is uploaded multiple times per week. The second link in the description is my premium membership, which is the Sephirah Shamanic School, whereby you will gain access to more advanced initiatory technologies and practices, as well as having more direct communication and contact with me. As I said, links are in the description. So on to today's topic. We're going to be discussing one of my favorite goddesses, and that is Chinnamaste. Chinnamaste is a powerful archetype for ego dissolution. She is an aspect of dissolution itself. We're going to be going into what Chinnamaste actually is, the symbolism behind her, and how her current of energy can be tapped into, and most importantly, why this current of energy is extremely important for the coming times. We're also going to be discussing Chinnamaste in relation to the release of shame, delving into detail in terms of what shame actually is and how to effectively process it using Chinnamaste's current of energy. Part of this transmission, you are also going to be receiving a direct Astra, which is an energetic missile that I attained through Sadhana with Chinnamaste. I'm going to launch that in a moment, and that will work through your nervous system and energy field, bringing you the energy of Chinnamaste and also casting any shame back to its source. Very, very powerful. So prepare for a very strong transmission from myself and Chinnamaste. So definitely stay tuned. So I highly recommend getting into a receptive space for this video, maybe in a meditative state, laying down and just preparing to receive, because I'm going to bring Chinnamaste's energy into the space and I'm going to direct her Astra into this recording so that anybody who is watching will receive the Astra and will be taken on a deep process of downloading Chinnamaste's current into their nervous system and will be taken on a process of shame release. If you do not want to go through this process, just say no and just watch the video as you would normally. Okay, intention is what matters. If you don't intend to receive it, then you won't receive it. It's as simple as that. Whereas if you do, and you get into a very receptive space, lay down, and just allow yourself to receive the energy whilst I'm giving this oral transmission, then I highly recommend doing that. Okay, so without further ado, get as comfortable as you can, and I recommend closing your eyes as we bring Chinnamaste's energy into the space. Om Shrim 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 Aim Vajavaroshanye Hom Hom Bat Swaha. Om Shrim 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 Aim Vajavaroshanye Hom Hom Bat Swaha. Om Shrim 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 Aim Vajavaroshanye Hom Hom Bat Swaha. Om Shrim 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 Aim Vajavaroshanye Hom Hom Bat Swaha. Om Shrim 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 Aim Vajavaroshanye Hom Hom Bat Swaha. Om Shrim 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 Aim Vajavaroshanye Hom Hom Bat Swaha. Okay, her energy is flowing and strongly too. So again, if you're sensitive to energy, you may begin to feel it. Just relax and allow the Astra to work on you as I give this oral transmission. So, in order to understand Chinnamaste, we need to understand what shame really is. And shame isn't just a feeling. Okay, when we think of shame, we think of feeling. We think of being ashamed. Shame is actually an energy. Okay, it's a metaphysical problem that links to a problem within the deep psyche. This problem is a force of stagnation. Okay, shame is an energy that causes you to stagnate. It's also an energy that holds a culmination of different feelings that can trigger one to actually find comfort within shame and stagnation as a whole. It's the opposite to power. Power is the force of transformation and change. It drives you forward. Shame stagnates you, stagnates your system, stagnates the world around you, and causes you to take on the projected restriction of what you are worthy of having versus not having. This shame comes from many different places. The majority of shame that we hold on to comes from other people. It's a very contagious energy, starting with our generational line. Our generational line, by default, will have a lot of unprocessed trauma, a lot of unprocessed shame that just kind of cascades down the lineage. When somebody is holding on to shame, they will pass it on to other people unconsciously. When they're holding on to a lot of shame themselves, they will pass it on unconsciously, often through covert means. And what I mean by that is methods of projection that are hidden in dysfunctional behavior that are classed as normal. So projecting shame is not always as simple as very direct, verbal, or violent projection of shame. It's often covert, okay? It's hidden in dysfunctional behavior and classed as normal. So the majority of shame you will take on from other people, or you will have taken on from other people. The other type of shame is the shame that we hold towards our own past mistakes, and one often connects to the other. So if we make a past mistake, then somebody may unconsciously project shame that will then latch onto that hook that was created from a past mistake. Shame is an extremely destructive energy that causes stagnation to the point where it causes illness within the system. Because illness is cultivated within the system from a place of stagnation, a system that is not stagnated will not be in resonance with a particular ailment. An illness develops when energy gathers in a particular part of the nervous system and it causes it to leak through to the physical body. And the reason why that energy sort of gathers in that place is because of shame. Shame is that energy that stops everything in its tracks and moves it into a place of unhelpful stillness and stagnation. So shame and power, two opposite things. One often leads to the other as well. So when we take on shame, there is a big energy exchange that happens. So the shame comes in, we are in our power, in our authenticity, the shame comes in, it shuts down the power, encases it, okay, and creates a literal shell around that segment of power, causing us to dissociate from our true power and potential, and in some cases even give our power away to external forces, be that collective, be that individual. So the shame comes in, the power is given away, and that causes a form of inverted programming that takes place. It basically causes a piece of programming to set in motion that causes us to actually find comfort within shame and stagnation. Because if we're a child, we are in our power, expressing our truth and authenticity. The shame comes in in the form of you're not worthy of doing this or you're never going to be able to do that. That projected restriction of shame comes in and the child isn't able to separate themselves from it because they haven't got a fully developed ego just yet. So they cannot separate that sensory input from themselves. So what that causes is that the child then internalizes it and then learns that it's actually safer to give their power away. It's safer to completely dissociate from their power, refusing ownership of it entirely. And they learn that if they just accept the shame, then things will be better, things will be more peaceful. It's an extremely inverted way of working. The same thing happens on the collective levels as well. We're programmed into giving our power away on the individual level as well as the collective level. We learn to just accept things the way that they are, but really what we're accepting is a severe state of both collective and individual power loss and shame transmission. So we learn to find peace within stagnation, and we learn to find danger or identify danger with power. Because if we are to be in our power, what's to stop us from being shut down in exactly the same way that we were as children? So shame is what causes the constructs to establish that encase our true potential and our true divinity. The shells of our psyche, which are built specifically to encase our truth and authenticity because they're not safe to feel, it creates a persona that is built out of shame, that is built out of a projected obligation from the world around us. So I encourage you to ask the question around your self-identity. Who do you think you actually are? Are you defining your sense of self based off of what somebody else has projected onto you or is expecting of you? This is the question that Chinnamaste wants us to ask ourselves. If shame is the literal force of stagnation that is responsible for the cultivation of the false self being the illusionary personas that we cultivate in order to make sense of the chaos and to effectively function within the world around us, Chinnamaste wants us to question that, wants us to ask, who are we beyond those constructs? Who are we beyond those roles? Who are we beyond those identities that we have had predefined for us collectively and individually? When the shame gets passed on through the generational line, we end up carrying forward roles that are projected from our ancestors and then playing out the same stories that our ancestors experienced. If we then take that programming out into the external world and then we try and break free from it, then a potentially re-traumatizing event may happen because we are holding on to that predefined programming that literally suggests that if we go beyond this predefined false self, then we're going to be re-traumatized. So then if we try and break out of it, then re-traumatization happens, and that causes us to find more comfort within the false self, more comfort within everything that the false self represents, which is a life of pure coping mechanism. So Chinnamaste is a potent current of energy that is an aspect of dissolution itself. She is a symbol of self-decapitation. Chinnamaste is often depicted as a strong female character, a strong goddess, often depicted as a naked woman or partially naked, severing her own head, cutting her own head off, taking her head aside, and then blood spurting out in either 2 or 3 different directions. It depends what you're really looking at or what picture or what version of the story you're looking at. The version of the story that many people are familiar with is Chinnamaste is bathing with her children being the primal forces of the universe, but also primal forces of both masculine and feminine. This is Dakini and Varini. Okay, so Dakini is said to be the fiery, very strong, sort of almost feminine aspect of strong, chaotic, feminine aspect of the cosmos. You could say the dark matter. Then you have Varini, which is the opposite, more masculine, more light, more ordered, more form. If we compare this to the Kabbalah, it would be the sphere of Gebura, the sphere of strength. That fiery Mars energy would be Dakini, that pure feminine force. And then Varini would be the opposite sphere to that, would be Chesed, okay, compassion, loving, kindness, that sort of thing. So the story goes, Chinnamaste is bathing with Dakini and Varini. Dakini and Varini are hungry. That hunger is symbolic of the call back towards godhood, the call back towards the primordial self, the primeval force of godhood that exists within all of us. Chinnamaste hears that call. Hears that call extremely clearly, and instead of seeking food, she sacrifices herself by severing her own head and actually feeding them her own blood. And again, the blood is symbolic of the life force. So what this really refers to specifically is self-decapitation, which is a symbol for ultimately dissolving the false self. Letting go of the false constructs, letting go of the predefined constructs, being willing to sacrifice who we think we are in order to grow into something which is much better, sacrificing the false self in order to start feeding the primordial self, which is our true godhood and our true potential that exists within, which is representative of Dakini and Varini, Dakini being the dark feminine, Varini being the light masculine. So what she's doing, Chinnamaste, is that she is sacrificing her own self-identity in order to sustain the true forces of masculine and feminine that represent who we really are beyond those constructs that we have had predefined for us. One thing about Chinnamaste is that she can also take off her head and reattach it. Okay, so Chinnamaste is known for being able to cut off her own head. The blood spurts out, feeds the primordial self, and then she places her head back on and then functions as normal. What this is symbolic of is the continuous process of death and rebirth. And despite the fact that Chinnamaste is pure dissolution, the fact that she can put her head back on shows the need for order. Okay, the need for order and chaos within one's being. So cutting off the head is symbolic of severing our false identities, allowing our false self to pass, to die, in order to sustain the true primal forces that exist underneath, our true godhood that has been encased by those predefined identities and constructs. And then placing her head back on is merely symbolic of the reconstruction of the ego in a way that is actually more helpful and more sustainable to one's healing and evolutionary path. What that does alone, when you look at both the severing and the reattachment, is that it shows you the need for balance, alongside the need for the balance of masculine and feminine, because when she severs her head, she's feeding both the masculine, Varini, and the feminine, Dakini, aspects of herself, aspects of the cosmos. So the whole process of engaging with Chinnamaste is learning how to embody balance and learning how to embrace the dissolution of your false self so that you can grow towards a much stronger and more authentic version of yourself. It also shatters the New Age illusions of having to destroy the ego and shows you the necessity of ego within your evolutionary path. Okay, without ego, you would not be able to function within the world around you, and Chinnamaste knows that. Okay, so the fact that she can reattach her head shows you that you're going to go through multiple stages within your evolutionary path, whereby you will sever your own head, sacrifice your false self, sacrifice the identities that have been encasing the true self, that were never actually who you are. And then once you embrace that dissolution, then you will experience an automatic reconstruction of a new self, a new ego, which is in closer alignment to your own truth and authenticity. So the fact that she is dedicated to sacrificing herself to feed this primordial force of Dakini and Varini simply shows you that she has that maternal energy, which means that she also has a very strong self-deification aspect to her as well. That she is there to kind of hold you, to sustain you through your continuous process of death and rebirth. Chinnamaste has a very motherly energy. I definitely feel that she is an aspect of the void itself. As one of the 10 Mahavidyas, okay, the 10 Mahavidyas are the 10 well-known forms of Parvati. In other words, the 10 well-known forms of Kali, one of which is Mahakali herself. Everybody knows who Kali is, or most people know who Kali is. Chinnamaste, Dumavati, Baglamukhi, or Durga, however you want to refer to her, and many other aspects as well, all of which are extremely fiery in nature and do have a dissolution aspect to them. So if you've ever worked or tuned into the energy of Goddess Kali, she has that very aggressive, dark, feminine energy. So all of the Mahavidyas represent a different aspect of the feminine, and the feminine is what birthed everything. So it's a different aspect of yourself, if we mirror it to the psyche, a different aspect of yourself that can help you get to know a different current of your own psyche, a different current of your own true nature, more than anything. Chinnamaste specifically is that motherly energy that is symbolic of tearing away shame, tearing away the constructs that have been built by shame, and ultimately restoring you to a much more true and authentic aspect of yourself. Chinnamaste for me has been a very important guide throughout my evolutionary path. And to be honest with you, until very recently, I didn't understand how vital a guide that she has been for me. So I first consciously interacted with Chinnamaste through a sadhana that I did with her. So chanting her Gayatri mantra, which you've heard, Om Shrim 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 Aim Bhadavaroshanye Hom Hom Bat Swaha. So chanting that, basically doing a very long sadhana, which is a very long process of chanting that mantra in order to open your vessel, clear the vessel to be able to receive that current of energy. So that was how I first started to interact with Chinnamaste. At first, she came through very weak. It's very gradual. If you engage in sadhana with any of the Hindu goddesses or any of the Tantric goddesses, you're going to be, doing a lot of devotion to really start to feel the energy in a tangible way. I interacted with Chinnamaste already with a lot of experience in shamanism, interacted with Chinnamaste through this sadhana, and as I continued to recite this mantra, I started out of nowhere to feel pressure in my neck, like a kind of stabbing in my neck. And the sensation started to then spread from the side of the neck, sort of around to the front and then around the back. It's literally like the sensation of sort of a severing going on. And as the sadhana was going on, I then started to go through a big process of dissolution. There was a lot of crazy stuff that was happening in my life at the time, crazy stuff such as illness in the family. All kinds of things were happening whilst I was engaging in this sadhana with Chinnamaste, and it got so intense to the point where Chinnamaste was like, enough in that sense. Yeah, it got so intense. She was like, enough, enough, enough. And me being who I was back then, I basically projected all aspects of my mother wound onto Chinnamaste and said Chinnamaste hates me, she's disappointed in me, she feels like I'm not good enough to complete the sadhana, all of that. So I then just left it as it was. I was like, okay, clearly I don't have a very strong connection with this particular deity, and just allowed it to be. But what followed was much more. Okay, what followed was a much bigger process of self-development that basically involved interacting with other pantheons, specifically the Western pantheons, the Western infernal spirits, and the Arabic infernal spirits, and then eventually being led down the path of Cliffothic initiation, the Dark Kabbalah. And when I started to interact with the Cliffoth and started to go through that process, and for those who don't know what the Cliffoth is, it's the dark inverted Kabbalistic tree, which is focused on deconstruction, focused on literally deconstructing the shells that have been created through shame in order to tap into one's true potential and surrender to the inner child in that way. So basically everything that Chinnamaste stands for. So I start interacting with this process, I start interacting with this Cliffothic process, and start being taken on a very big process of shedding these layers of the false self, start going through a process that is so highly personal that it's almost ridiculous trying to share it with anybody else, just because of how personal it truly was and is, and still is, realistically speaking. So as that process went on, as I started to get closer to the Cliffothic Abyss, I started to feel Chinnamaste's energy more. Okay, and by this point, years had passed, since I attempted the sadhana and was asked very clearly to stop halfway through the sadhana. So I never actually finished it. Okay. And then as I got closer to the abyss, and as I entered the Cliffothic abyssal energy, Chinnamaste's energy comes through and says, I'm ready to give you this etheric energy. Okay. And then sends through her Astra, and then I receive her Astra. Okay, and the Astra is what, if you opted in to receive it, is what is flowing through your system now. And this Astra was built specifically to cast out shame that had been stagnated within the energy field and nervous system. So basically, Chinnamaste has been guiding my whole process ever since I first interacted with her. This pure aspect of dissolution, this symbol of self decapitation, this symbol of the ultimate shame release, the ultimate release of the false self, the ultimate devouring of who you thought you were, has been guiding me this whole time. And it wasn't until I got into the Cliffothic Abyss that I really started to realize, yeah, Chinnamaste has been guiding me, and now I'm actually in resonance to receive what I wanted from the sadhana years ago in that respect. So Chinnamaste has been one that I've had a very bizarre relationship with. It's not one that I've really tuned into on a regular basis, but has been one that has been guiding my entire process. And I feel that if I hadn't have interacted with her initially, I wouldn't have this really cool Astra that I can cast into my clients and send to people whenever I really want to, which is cool enough as it is. But I also wouldn't be on this very deep process using the occult sciences and the shamanic work that I am now. I think I would be on a very different process if I hadn't have interacted with Chinnamaste. So a lesson that I've really learnt from Chinnamaste is that even though she is in a different pantheon to what I would normally sort of work with, the energy still, you can still shift into resonance with these spirits, with these deities, even without interacting with them consciously. And there are many different ways of doing this devotional practice. Understanding that the devotional practice towards any deity or spirit, more than anything, is a devotional practice towards yourself. Chinnamaste, bringing her balancing motherly energy, has definitely showed me through this big dissolution process that when you are honoring a deity or a spirit through a sadhana or whatever that may be, you are honoring an aspect of yourself. You are honoring your own process. Yes, you are honoring an external divinity as well, but you are also honoring what that external divinity symbolizes. And in Chinnamaste's case, it symbolizes all things relating to the ultimate release of shame and the growth towards your truth and authenticity, the balancing of the masculine and feminine with Dakini and Varini, and ultimately that continuous process of death and rebirth that is symbolized by the self-decapitation with the restoration of the head of Chinnamaste. So she really does show you how you can transmute shame into power just by feeling it. Okay, and that's the same with anything. Every feeling has its polarity. Okay, so light has dark, masculine has feminine, power has shame. One is going to lead you to the other. Okay, what many people don't realize, yes, we hear this all the time. It's obvious one leads to the other, but many people don't realize it. Okay, many people within the New Age community are all focused on love and light, but because they're focusing so much on light, their psyche is then coming through and being like, oh, yeah, by the way, you need to interact with the darkness. You need to now understand why you can only tap into so much of this light. And it's exactly the same with shame and power. When we feel shame and we embody it and surrender to it, we transmute it. The same with any feeling. By welcoming the feeling and not trying to get rid of it and not trying to cover it in a coping mechanism and pretend it's not there, by feeling it, we transmute it. When we transmute it, we embody its polarity. So the purpose of Chinnamaste is to feel the shame, look at the shame, look at where it's come from, look at how you have embodied it, look at how it has formed within your nervous system, and most importantly, why you have not wanted to look at it, and then actually learning to feel it with enthusiasm. And when you feel it with enthusiasm and embrace it, you tap into the potential that is underneath, because it's no longer something that needs to be avoided. It's no longer something that needs to be fought with. It's no longer something that needs to be covered in a coping mechanism and completely neglected on all levels. So you embrace a particular feeling, you embrace shame, you feel it, you give yourself permission to feel it, you will transmute it, and you will embrace its polarity, and that is power. When you embrace power, you will enjoy the power, you will love the power, you will embrace the power, but then you will have to feel its opposite again, and that's death and rebirth. Once you embrace the power and you embrace where you want to be, you're going to reach a point where you need to then shift into greater resonance to be able to receive more of that power, to be able to receive more of the feeling that you're wanting to attain. At which point you need to go back into the shadows again. Okay, go back into the shadows, understand your limitations, give them permission to be felt, feel them with enthusiasm, and then you will transmute it and then go back into the power, back into the light. You'll feel the light, then you'll reach a point, oh, okay, I'm not able to tap into as much of this light as I want to. Then you'll go back into the darkness and do it again. Okay, and this is what Chinnamaste symbolizes. This is the decapitation, yeah, mixed with the restoration of the head. Okay, the decapitation happens when you feel and you're willing to feel your emotions and embrace them on all levels of your being, feel them with enthusiasm. You shed that layer of yourself, your false self falls away, which is the aspect of yourself which has been avoiding the unpleasant feelings altogether. You embrace the space that you've just cleared, and then a new self will reconstruct, and then you will embrace the power that has been repressed underneath, and then it will happen again and again and again. It's a continuous process. Okay, in Chinnamaste's case, she's not just going to sever her head once. I love using the example of severing one's head. I may have to start using it to my clients. Clients come in, I'll be like, just sever your own head, you'll be fine. But symbolically, severing your own head it's not something that you'll do once. And with Chinnamaste, it's not something that she will do once. Okay, so it's not one big ego death and then you find your true self. It's a continuous process. It's a continuous process of evolution. And normally, when people understand that, most people can't be asked, to be honest with you. Once people understand that, then, it's very easy to reach a point where, okay, you've reached an identity that you like this aspect of yourself, and then that's it. And then it's easy to attach to that identity. But if we mirror it to Chinnamaste, you will hear the primordial call again. You will hear the call from Dakini and Varini, just as Chinnamaste will, and then she will have to sever her head again and feed them again. Okay. She severs her head once, feeds them, they've had enough food, fine, head is restored. Okay. And then it will happen again. They'll get hungry again. And it's like, okay, fine. Yeah. Head gets chopped off, feeds Dakini and Varini, the primordial aspects of the self, and then the new self will be reconstructed. Translate that to the healing path. You will sever your own head. You will release who you thought that you were in order to embrace who you really are underneath. Once you find who you really are underneath, once you felt those emotions and transmuted them, a new self will be embraced. The head will be placed on. That's it. Fine and dandy until you hear that call. And then it's time to go back in to the dissolution, back into the abyss, back into the darkness to find the potential that is underneath, to dissolve your false self again, head comes off, and then embrace who it is that you're meant to be. Okay, so you are going to be growing continuously when you interact with a current of energy like Chinnamaste. Okay, she is a fierce goddess. She is not for everybody. Kali is very popular. Okay, Kali is the most popular Mahavidya. Okay, everybody knows who Kali is. Okay, the New Age is like Kali this, Kali that, Kali this, Kali that. Not many people know about Chinnamaste. Okay, not many people know about Chinnamaste, and realistically, many people do find Chinnamaste's energy quite triggering because, I mean, she's severing her own head. So what you've got to look at is what that really symbolizes. Okay, so there's a lot of death energy with all of these Mahavidyas. Okay, there's a lot of death energy with Chinnamaste herself. She's also known to be wearing a necklace of skulls. Okay, wearing a necklace of skulls, which is symbolic of the many decapitated heads. Okay, the many identities that have been shed and the continuous metamorphosis that she as a being is undergoing. So the Chinnamaste necklace that you see in a lot of the pictures with all of the skulls is symbolic of all of the previous identities that have been shed and a symbolism of death energy in itself and the necessity of it to embrace who it is that we are supposed to be. Chinnamaste requires you to build a relationship with death energy. Otherwise, you'll interact with her and she will start to take you on a very big process of befriending death energy, like what happened with me. I didn't finish the sadhana. Okay, I didn't finish the sadhana, so she was like, okay, stop. She saw that it was actually going to work at my detriment. She's like, okay, stop. And then go and do something else. Okay, go and continue that sadhana in a way that actually works for you and in a way that's actually going to be constructive for you, ultimately. So she will take you on a journey once you give her that permission slip to come through. She will take you on a very powerful journey of befriending death energy. Okay, and it's not one that's necessarily going to be comfortable. A lot is going to change in your life when you interact with a current like Chinnamaste. She is also depicted as standing on a dead body. Okay, that's often the image of Chinnamaste. Beautiful image of a goddess wearing all of these skull necklaces with all of these skulls representing her old identity, severing her own head, feeding her children with the blood, and stepping on a dead body. Yeah, what an amazing goddess. And stepping on this dead body is symbolic of a term that I've used before, and that is treading upon the corpses of those who choose slavery and ignorance over knowledge and power. And what that really means is that you're not treading on other people's corpses. You're treading on your own corpses. You're treading on your own old self, okay? Your own false self. You've got to be willing to tread upon the corpses, your own identities that would rather choose shame, that have been programmed to choose shame over power, that have been programmed to choose slavery and ignorance over true knowledge and power of your true self and your true sense of self-expression. So this goddess is not a small goddess to interact with by any means. Extremely powerful, but is extremely important symbol for the coming times because shame is the most dense problem within the world around us. It's the shame that encases our truth, stops us from being vulnerable, encases our heart, builds a shell around the heart in order to stop us from embracing our true vulnerability because the false self doesn't want us to be re-traumatized. Okay, the false self is established specifically to keep us safe, but in doing so, shells our truth and authenticity and sticks to a reality of coping mechanisms and shame as opposed to true, genuine authenticity. Okay, so she is an important symbol and an important goddess to interact with for this purpose, purely because our world needs that. Shame is the reason why the world around us has so much problem with vulnerability, while so many people have problem with true, authentic vulnerability, while so many people are stuck in dynamics of obligation and giving their power away, still operating from that false self, not in tune with what it is that the soul is really here to do, not in tune with what it is that their true essence is really wanting from this existence. So shame is at the crux of all of it. Okay, shame is responsible for the establishment of the false self, and it's maintained by the false light. Okay, the love and light community create this illusion of false light. Highly recommend checking out my false light video, by the way. They build this illusion of false light because it feels safer, but really it just satisfies coping mechanisms. And that's exactly why it attracts a lot of people in, and why so many people are in that love and light spirituality, purely because it satisfies their coping mechanisms and it gives them even more of a reason to not look at their own shadow. But when you really get into the deeper aspects, you know, going beyond the New Age view of Om and chanting all of these mantras for love and light, when you really get into the deep, earthy Hindu practices, you really get into the deep, agori practices, then you find a very powerful, dark journey into your own psyche, and Chinnamaste is one of the best allies for taking you through that journey, for offering your false self to the currents of the void so that you can embrace who you really are underneath. Okay, that continuous self-decapitation and reconstruction, that continuous death and rebirth, death and rebirth, death and rebirth, growing towards your truth and authenticity as you go. She shatters those illusions of patriarchy, shatters those illusions of having to get to a certain point and then that's it done. She takes all of that away and shows you who you really are. So honor to Chinnamaste. I think that's everything that I needed to speak about in today's video. If this was helpful to you, definitely hit like and subscribe. As I said in the beginning of this video, check out my membership programs. Patreon, first link in the description for a cheaper membership program, but also extremely powerful for all of the exclusive content that is shared on there. And the second link in the description for the premium membership program with the Sephirah Shamanic School. But for now, thank you guys. Hit like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.